This podcast is better when I'm on it.
Oh, well, sometimes we do edit things out,
Yeah.
actually. Make an exception. Lovecraft Country is bloody.
Lovecraft Country was an emotionally exhausting journey.
Lovecraft Country is a black story.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Fallingtower's Watch the First podcast in which we watch the first episode of a series so that you don't have to. With us, as always, is solo guitarist, skateboarder, and long hair aficionado Michael Kenyon Rosenberg.
Maybe when I was younger. I mean,
You were a long hair guy.
yeah.
Our very special guest today is Mr. Cirroc Lofton. You know him as Jake Sisko, or that guy on that show, and a bunch of other shows, by the way. Also, my awesome partner in The Seventh Rule, and three of us also work on Virtual TrekCon together. Lots of good stuff to talk about. My name's Ryan T. Husk. We are doing a review of Lovecraft Country, HBO's Lovecraft Country, that is. First episode entitled Sundown.
Yeah.
Gordon Lightfoot sings a song called Sundown.
Sundown.
There it is. It's a D.
There it is.
It's a D. Okay. So first things first. Cirroc, by the way, everybody at home, if you want us to review a show, just say WTF Seinfeld, or WTF Snorks, or WTF A Different World. And that just means watch the first. And then if you do that in the comments below, we'll add that to our list and we'll probably review it.
Yeah. Tell us what we should watch. We don't want to do the work.
Yeah, it could be something you love. It could be something you hate. If you want to punish us and give us a terrible show, do it. We'll see what happens. First thing we do, Cirroc, this is it. We get right down to business. By the way, I just want to say that this is like a dream come true for me because I've known Michael for over 20 years. We do this show together. We have a lot of fun. Cirroc, you and I do The Seventh Rule together. We get along very well. I have a ton of fun. You either have a ton of fun or you pretend to very well. You're a great actor. But
Thank you.
it's really cool to have both of you together. It's quite a dream, and I do very much enjoy my time with you. So thank you so much for joining us today.
I'm glad that we can make your dream come true.
That's what my mission is. It's our goal in life.
Yeah. Here we go. Okay. By the way, Michael, Cirroc's best reaction anytime I make a joke is to go.
Yeah, it's swallowing. I'm trying to swallow it down.
Yeah.
Not touching that.
My best reaction when Ryan makes a joke is just.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's good for that. He'll stop the crowd, you know.
Well, the good news for you guys is that I will make no jokes today. So.
Oh, great.
Okay. I have a hard time believing that, but okay.
Well, there's only one way to find out. So the point is, we know Michael and I know each other very well, so we like to predict. We like to guess based on our knowledge of each other if the other guy liked this show or not. You can feel free to join in on that. Cirroc, you know me pretty well by now.
Sure. Yeah.
So my first guess, I'm going to say Michael liked this show. I think that he liked it somewhere in between good and very good. I feel like that's about where he stands on it. Cirroc, I'm going to say Cirroc likes the show almost very much. You know, very, like he likes it a lot. He's not going to,
very almost.
Yeah, he's not going to save the world about it, but he likes it very much. Michael, what are your... Oh, and everybody at home, make your predictions. Do you think I liked it? You think Cirroc liked it? You think Michael liked it? Let us know. Type it in right now in the live chat. You're about to find out. Michael, what do you think?
I think Ryan had a hard time getting into it because it was a little slow for him at first. But then near the end, when it started really picking up, he was starting to like it. But I don't know if he would watch the next episode. We'll have to wait till the end to find that out. Cirroc, I do think he liked it as well.
Mm-hmm. Cirroc, you have any predictions for us?
Yeah, I think you both hated it. That's where I'm going to go for. No, I'm joking. I think you guys enjoyed it. I mean, I'm sure you've watched many episodes along your journey of doing this and reviewing shows. So I'm curious to see what your criteria is for liking a pilot episode. How quickly you get involved in the story, or the characters kind of relate to you. So those are the kinds of things that I'm curious to find out from you guys about your experience on just rating pilot episodes, which I think is a fascinating thing to do, right?
Mm-hmm. All right.
But I will, yeah. So that my guess is that you probably thought it was a little bit harder to get into it in the beginning, but then you started to understand some of the concepts that were trying to be told, and some of the things, and maybe piqued your interest, maybe not. I'm not sure about that.
Mm-hmm. All right, this is it. And now on to the part of the show where we just duke it out for 45 minutes. Okay. So the first thing is we compare and contrast what we expected before we watched the episode versus what we actually got.
Don't we want to know what the episode was about?
Oh, yes. In fact, I was just going to suggest that. So this is when I say, Michael Kenyon Rosenberg, what was this show about anyway?
A young African-American travels across the U.S. in the 1950s in search of his missing father. Atticus Freeman, in this episode, Atticus Freeman meets up with his friend Leticia and his uncle George to embark on a road trip across 1950s Jim Crow America in search of his missing father.
That is interesting, by the way, that it said young, a young man. Before we get to that other thing that I was going to say we're going to do, Cirroc, you know Greg Oden, right?
Yes.
The basketball player. For those of you at home, Greg Oden is a basketball player. I think he was drafted number 1 by the Portland Trail Blazers the year that Kevin Durant was drafted number 2 by the Seattle Supersonics, if I remember correctly. Point is, when it said a young man, this guy, when I was watching this, I was like, this guy reminds me of Greg Oden in that he's a 50-year-old, 25-year-old, right? You remember when Greg Oden came into the league, he was like 19, but he looked like he was 48. For some reason, he just looked like he could kind of be both. And then he like grew out this beard and he actually looked like 10 years younger. It's really weird. But this guy, I was like, this guy looks 45 to me, but they're presenting him as if he's a young man. I'll bet you he's young. So anyway, he just reminded me of Greg Oden. Anyway, yeah. Michael.
I get that part of it. He has a kind of a more mature face, but he also is in great shape. So he's able to kind of pull off the youthful, athletic kind of look. So
right.
I wasn't terribly caught up on his age at this point. I felt like it didn't really relate to the story as much.
Yeah. That's Cirroc saying, Ryan, nobody cares.
That's the right way.
Yeah, that's his way of saying that. Anyway, so what we do now is we say what we expected versus what we got. Michael, before you watched the episode, what did you expect?
Well, just based on the title only, because I didn't really watch any trailers or anything like that. So just based on the title only, I was expecting Lovecraft monsters. I mean, H.P. Lovecraft was an author of like science horror, kind of a fiction, fantasy horror. And he, like The Call of Cthulhu is probably one of his most favorite works, famous works. So we all know about Cthulhu because of H.P. Lovecraft. So I was definitely expecting to see some Lovecraft monsters.
Mm-hmm. Lovecraft is in the air, man. So, Cirroc, what did you expect before you watched the first episode for the first time? Had you heard anything about it?
No, I didn't know anything about H.P. Lovecraft's work as a writer and that whole. I mean, I'm aware of the genre of that kind of pulp fiction, science fiction writing, but I wasn't aware of the work I was expecting, because J.J. Abrams was attached to this project, a lot of special effects and good action and, visually appealing story, because J.J. Abrams is, masterful at putting together projects. So I was expecting a high level of quality in this episode.
Mm-hmm. I didn't expect anything really. I didn't know anything about it, and I'm not really smart about stuff like Michael is. So Lovecraft Country, I was like, I couldn't remember the title because it meant nothing to me. I didn't even make the H.P. Lovecraft connection until they mentioned it in the actual episode. I was like, oh. So I had no idea. I was just Lovecraft Country. I'm like, is this like a witchcraft thing? Is this like, I really didn't know. I didn't know anything. I had no clue. So I had no expectations, really. I just expected it to hopefully be good, and that was really it. But that's what we expected. Michael, what did you get?
What I got was, like I kind of said at the beginning, emotionally intense horror story about, really, the main horror to me in the story is about being black in the 1950s. And the main monsters to me were all the kind of racist, bigoted white people that would you could feel, watching the story, you could feel the tension of what it meant to be black and driving through this country and these different counties where, man, like, I mean, obviously, still today, if you're black and driving around, you can still get murdered by the police. But I mean, back then it was like, that was legal to, if the sun goes down and you're black in that county, then you're getting lynched, and that's legal. There's nothing that you can do to stop that kind of thing. So that to me was the biggest horror. But we also did have some cool Lovecraft monsters too. Like in the very opening, you see like there's Cthulhu, there's like War of the Worlds spaceships, and then there's like Deja Thoris comes down from one of the spaceships from Princess of Mars. She is the Princess of Mars in that story from William S. Burroughs, I think it was. But yeah, so I liked that we get all of the cool Lovecraft monsters too, but like really the real horror was just, man, being black in the 1950s.
Cirroc, when you first watched the episode, what did you get versus what you expected?
Well, I have to say that the opening scene was a little bit, took me by surprise, because it set me in a place where I'm like, okay, is this what this is about? And so I'm thinking, I'm like all over the place. I'm like, is this about a war? They're in the trenches, then the aliens come. And I was like, if this is going to continue to be like this is way beyond the realm of something that I'm kind of interested in. So I thought it was interesting that they took an approach of opening on a dream sequence. I do understand it because of the history that Michael, you were talking about, and they were making the tie-ins to Lovecraft's work and the the aliens and spaceships and whatnot. But I didn't have an understanding of that. So for me, just somebody who's completely oblivious to all of that, just seeing the show open like that was like, okay, is this where we're going with it? I was actually happy to see that it was a dream sequence, and then we go into, the setting in the 50s segregated Jim Crow, in the South essentially. But we're getting into the meat of the story, and that's where I actually liked a lot of the things that were being talked about. I think right away we had the opening scene where the bus breaks down, and there was a moment in which he was looking at the ride that was coming and picked him up, saying, is there any room for me on that truck? And you could see him processing that, like, no, I'm not going to make it on that truck. I'm pretty sure I'm not even going to go ahead and ask. I already know what the answer is.
Just asking for trouble.
It's just asking for trouble, and you already know. And so I like the way they opened on that, because that gave us kind of a real feeling and set the tone for me about the kind of, how bigoted, how racist those times were, right? And you see somebody on the side of the road stranded, you naturally offer help. But in this case, if you're black, you're not getting any help and you're on your own. So I thought that was interesting because we've seen a lot of people that had to overcome that exact kind of situation in order for us to get to where we are here today, including athletes like Jackie Robinson, who they opened
Right.
by depicting, right?
That was cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
He defeats Cthulhu with a swing of his bat.
Yeah.
Right, and that's what he was up against. He was up against this monolithic racist infrastructure that didn't really accept or want him in, right? And didn't want him to break those barriers. So he did kind of break down a lot of things with the swing of his bat. He did defeat the monster, or at least challenge the monster by breaking down those color barriers.
Right. Jackie Robinson was cool to see, though. That was great. As soon as you see number 42, you're like, all right, I know who that is. I'll tell you what I got. I got something that I still don't know exactly how I feel about it, because it reminded me of so many other things that we have reviewed and that we have not reviewed, but I've seen on my own, in good ways and in bad ways. I feel like at least a dozen times I was like, it's kind of like, it reminds me of this, or it reminds me of that, or it did this but better, or you know what I mean? So it definitely, like, for example, like Dusk Till Dawn, right? We get that feeling. And, you know, we can go through a few of them along the way, but initially when I saw that dream sequence, I'm like, oh, cool, buckle in. Here we go. Oh, this is weird. It's fun. Who knows? Let's enjoy it. And then it basically took about 55 minutes for it to get back to that. And that's boy, oh boy, you know, it's not as bad as, say, like WandaVision was, where WandaVision literally never got to the actual story.
Yes.
It just went right, but the entire first episode did not get to the story, you know. This one took about 55 minutes. So definitely better than WandaVision in my book, but I feel like as long as we're getting right into the meat of things, I feel like they should have cut out 20 minutes, honestly. You could have, those 55 minutes could have been 35 and it would have been perfectly fine. We know who the characters were. We liked them. We enjoyed them. But I feel like we could have gotten, it was 70 minutes, man. Whew. That's long.
Yeah, there were a couple of scenes that I would have deleted. And they were kind of in the beginning, most of them. The scene that set up Letitia with the outdoor kind of music festival thing. Same. I thought that was a little bit slow, and I know they wanted the music in there, and they were trying to establish her and her situation being kind of homeless or whatever, and destitute and not good with managing money. But I just felt like they could have told that story a lot faster and without that whole big setting, and probably saved them the money of having that production, you know, the stage and the extra people in the background.
I love that. You're like, they had to pay like 30 extras. What were they thinking, man? Come on, man.
We want to see special effects. We want to see these monsters. No,
I mean, but we like the story. We love the story. But yeah, I just like, there were a few scenes. I feel like, I mean, I'll just get right into it. I feel like HBO has a ton of money. This show has a huge budget, clearly. Okay. I think, what is it? Peele and Abrams are both involved in this. Right. I mean, this is very, very big. I cannot remember the last time or the first time that there was this kind of big money with a kind of an established franchise with Lovecraft that is centered around Black people with a Black cast, right? This is
actually based on a novel.
Right, which I assumed because of how slow, you know, we'll get into that rule in a second. But like, but the thing is like, this feels like it had a lot of importance and weight to it, that they have this much of a budget and huge names attached and Black stars, right? So I feel like it deserved one more pass on the script. like I feel like it deserved slightly more effort in the writing, because this is an important, I feel like it's an important show. It's something like that we don't get very often. Cirroc, you could speak on this more than I can, but like, I don't feel like Black people get huge budget shows about them, for them, leading them, you know what I mean? And I feel like not having a great script does them a disservice. It was still good. I still think it was good. I liked it. But I don't know. What do you think about that, Cirroc?
I mean, yeah, the fact that it's a rarity to find quality stories with Black leads, that's true. I mean, we're usually playing stereotypical roles, and this is atypical as far as what we're used to, right? This is actually a serious story. This is a Black man in search of his father who's gone missing, so you have the family dynamic. You also see him with his uncle, another element of family. So this is a story about family, about Black families. And one of the things I thought was great, what they did was when they got inside of the Black families and they showed the household, you got to see kind of the things that you see Black households do. There was a girl drawing cartoon figures or drawing comic book characters in her own time, and when Atticus comes rolling up to the house, and you get to see different things, and I thought that was good. Also, an emphasis on education or intelligence. I think Atticus was reading the letter that his father wrote, and he made a comment about the misspelling, and he said something like, for somebody who stressed the importance of being educated. So they mentioned the fact that we're watching an educated family or educated people or people that have more to offer than the stereotypical drug dealer, gangster characters that we always see.
Mm-hmm. Michael, what do you think of the writing?
I thought it was actually really good. Like I said, like I was kind of like very emotionally invested in the story all the way through. And the fact that I was like kind of emotionally drained after watching this episode,
especially at that end.
Right. Yeah, there was so much, and like I didn't mind the slower parts in the beginning. I thought it kind of helped build the story, and I was engaged the whole way through. I guess like towards the beginning I was taking more notes, and like later on I couldn't even take notes anymore because I was just like so hyper focused on what was going on the episode. But I think the writing did a great job. I think they did a great job of like keeping the stakes very high for these characters as they're traveling through these kind of dangerous parts of the country.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The other element that I liked they added was of the uncle being the publisher or the author of this Safe Negro Travel Guide. Yeah. So, and that's a real thing for
awesome, man. I'd never heard of that, but that's really good depth. Sorry, what were you saying?
No, it's a real. I mean, it's a good detail. It's a good attention to detail, in my opinion, because it's a real thing that Black people had to deal with. They had to know which routes were the safe routes to be on, and which hotels they could find that would accept them. So, it altered your travel significantly in order to get from point A to point B. And I thought that was another accurate kind of real life depiction of the struggles that Black people had in those times.
Mm-hmm. Which restaurants could you go to where they're not going to call a posse of hillbillies to come murder you?
Right. And that's a real thing. And, that's something that a lot of people had to experience. So I just thought that they did a good job of paying attention to those kinds of details and really setting up the depravity of that time.
Mm-hmm. And along the lines of the education side of things, they mentioned something about writing, which was, they said something like, good characters have to have flaws. They didn't say it in so many words, but when they say, look, we have characters that have flaws, but that makes better characters. That doesn't make you not like the character. That just adds depth. So I did not see a lot of flaws in these main characters, but I am sure that they will have flaws, minor flaws that are shown here in later episodes. They will, because this is the writer telling you that they understand writing. So I'm like, So I'm like, I know that these characters are going to continue to have more and more depth, even if in this first episode they're just very minor things. I liked all three of the main characters very much. I thought they were great. I especially liked, is she in this? Yeah, this lady here. Yeah,
she's
Letitia.
definitely a very flawed character.
Yeah, and she lights that actress lights up the stage. I mean, she reminded me so much of Gina on Martin. Remember her?
Mm-hmm.
She with the dimples and like just very much like her, Tisha Campbell, I think. As soon as I saw her, I was like, "Whoa!"
Yeah,
Gina.
her name is Journey Smollett, and she's Jesse Smollett's brother.
I was going to ask you when you said Smollett. Wow.
Very attractive young lady.
Yeah, the camera loves her. I thought the actors were well chosen. Good job on the casting.
Totally.
Also, Courtney Vance, who plays the uncle, is also does a really good job. I think. I like the chemistry. I like the pace. The casting was good, and also the wardrobe and set design I thought was particularly good. I paid attention to small details like the outfits they were wearing, the watches, the traveling luggage that they used, and then in the backgrounds inside of the different apartments or restaurants. So I thought the wardrobe set design was also done very well.
Yeah, you bring up a good point, which is something that I possibly liked the best of this show was the feeling of being taken to that time. Mm-hmm. Very well, that time and place, whether it was walking down the street through the, with the fields on either end, or whether it was the inside of the house, or whether it was, outdoors, the kids are playing baseball, other people are barbecuing, they're setting up picnic tables. And it's like you are there, and it made me nostalgic for a time that I was never alive for. Just like it's a simpler time of like baseball and playing out in the streets and having barbecues.
You mean pre-coronavirus time?
maybe we're all just sitting here in front of our computers going, wow. People used to go out in the streets, Pa. Tell me about it. But it was like, it really took me there, and it made me happy. It was interesting. And like you're saying, every little nook and cranny that you looked at had detail, had authenticity. And I really liked that.
I think I had a completely different experience than you, because I felt like I was brought back there as well. But I felt like I was brought back in the skin of one of these black characters, that I was like, feeling the intense emotions that they were feeling. And I think the score had a lot to do with that. The score was fantastic. It just had that kind of ominous feeling throughout it. And like anytime they encountered anybody along the road, I was just fearful for them like the whole time.
Yeah, I saw the music was done by Raphael Sadiq, who was famous musician producer who did so many bands back in the day. But I did also notice the music. I think they opened the music with the war scene and the UFOs in some kind of old school style war music that we remember from those old movies. Mm-hmm. And they also laid in some hip hop in there. They actually also inserted dialogue from James Baldwin, who was one of the great black writers of our time, author of Go Tell It to the Mountain. And James Baldwin is also just a prolific speaker. I mean, he's just amazing at what he does. And I think they took bits and pieces of what he's said in an interview or a speech at some point and overlaid it on the cutting shots as they were driving through the South there. So I thought that was also good, because you got to see shots of the colored only water fountains or this or that, and James Baldwin actually speaking about. I think he was talking about the Algerian who felt disenfranchised and what their reality was as opposed to everybody else's reality. So it talks about what people's realities are, and I think in this particular case, you get to see what the reality is for Black people at that time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the music was a highlight for me in that it helped me. Somebody here that needs to be entertained, and when we were going through, like I said, 55 minutes of not exactly what I thought it was going to be after the first 30 seconds, then you start thinking, wait, was that just the first 30 seconds? Is it just going to be this, which is, dreary, scary, sad things, but not sci-fi, not fantasy, not adventure, whatever it seemed like it might have been. But then, and as Mike knows, I like to say it's very clear. And again, it was clear to me in this episode, even though I didn't know it at the time, but that this is an existing franchise. Existing franchises always seem to have more patience because they have a built-in fan base. Mm-hmm. And so whenever there's a show that takes a long time to take off, it's usually a pre-existing franchise because they know, don't worry, the fans will stick around because they know what's coming. But those of us that don't know what's coming, I feel like the guy scoring hooked it up because even in the most mundane scenes, they would create like this tense music to where you're like, okay, something's going to happen. I don't know what or when, but the music's saying, don't worry, something's coming, dude.
Well, I thought that there was a little bit of a clue earlier on when he's reading. So he picks up the book, the Lovecraft book. And first of all, I didn't know that Lovecraft was incredibly racist. He wrote that super racist poem.
Really?
Yeah. So remember, he I don't want to repeat the title.
Great of Niggers, that's the name of it. And
yeah.
That was the poem that he was referring to in the movie.
Yeah, he basically compares them to beasts and says that they were like meant to like span the chasm between beasts and man. But he's basically comparing them to beasts. So I read that poem. I had to look it up because I've never heard of it before, and man, I was shocked by that. But then around that same scene, he's reading the letter from his dad with his uncle, and there's some interesting stuff in there. He says that he's got like a special, some kind of special powers or something like that, or like some kind of special destiny. So right away, that's kind of like, when you hear that kind of thing in a story, you automatically think of like, oh, okay, he's the Luke Skywalker. He's the one that has the special powers and the special destiny. And so that to me was very interesting, and I couldn't wait to find out more about that. And we kind of get a hint at the end when there's those creepy white people in the long stretched the silver car, and then they open the door and they're like, "We've been waiting for you. Welcome home."
Well, since we're going out to the end there, I thought that was, like with every show that's trying to hook you, that's the high point of the episode, because the message is that there's way more to this story than meets the eye. Right. It could have been, the messenger wasn't really interesting to me, or doesn't really matter. He could have seen it in a note. Could have been on a television screen talking to him. It could have been Uncle George turning and telling him. But the point is that, yeah, right, like you said, Michael, he's the Luke Skywalker. He's the Neo. There's something way bigger to all of this that's about to happen, which makes you go like, ooh, what's going to happen? But then we can't talk about it if we're going to watch the next episode yet. But.
Yeah, we'll have to talk about that at the end.
Yeah.
They did a few things that were clever. For example, in that note that he was reading, he thought it was Arkham, Massachusetts.
Right.
And it turned out it's Ardham, right? But the Arkham is the publisher of the book made by H.P. Lovecraft, The Outsider and others. So
right.
Deep cut.
They did that little play. And I like that move. So there were subtle things like that I thought were evidence of good writing, Michael. And just they inserting things like that.
Agreed.
The other things that they did were, you saw a lot of references to books.
Yeah.
And that was one thing that I enjoyed as well. Just the fact that he mentioned John Carter Goes to Mars, The Outsider, and others. There were a few other books that were mentioned in this episode, and I like the fact that they kept him with a book in his hand, or they kept him, they making it about books. and reading. So one of the things it reminded me too of, I don't know if you guys thought about it at all, but I kind of thought about Far Beyond the Stars
Yes.
and Deep Space Nine.
I was going to ask you that earlier. Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect, right?
Yeah, because in that episode, Sisko's character is wearing those kind of circular glasses that wrap around your ears, and in this episode, he's wearing those similar glasses. And there was also feelings like when he was outside on the street in the Chicago scene. It made me think of the outdoor scenes in Far Beyond the Stars episode with the kids playing by the fire hydrant and things like that. So there were certain imagery that actually made me think of Far Beyond the Stars as well.
Plus the whole writing aspect of it, writing sci-fi and the time, the era. I mean, like very much, yeah, definitely.
I would be surprised if the producers and writers did not have that episode in mind when they were creating this episode.
I agree. I think it would at least that they were aware of it and have watched it at some point, because it was very, very much an homage to it.
I'll tell you one thing real quick that I thought. There was one scene where I just kind of stopped everything.
There was a lot of scenes in this show, actually, Ryan.
See, Cirroc, Michael makes jokes too. Don't encourage him. Don't Cirroc's like, but that's your humor, Ryan. No, we have different humor. There was especially a scene that stood out to me where I thought the writing was perfect. And that was when they're pulled over by the cop who's saying like sunsets at 7:09. And they say, oh, well, we'll get out of here. And he's like, I don't think you can make it, in that amount of time without speeding. I mean, there was just so much subtext, just like it practically wasn't even subtext. It was so layered on thickly that it wasn't even subtext. They were just practically saying it. And then he says, well, what about if we go north, with a big smile? Like, I don't trust this guy. He's a terrible human. What about if we go north? He's like, that might work. But I mean, it was just line for line. I thought that was a perfect scene, perfectly written scene. It really stood out to me. I don't know. Was there any scenes that jumped out to you guys, or anything in particular that you really enjoyed about it?
I mean, that was the most intense, I thought, of the scenes, because, you really got to feel all the emotion, and, they're guilty of nothing except for just being black in the wrong area, right?
Right. And the dude's almost acting like a cat playing with its prey, or, like they know that he's just toying with them to be an asshole. Like he's just fucking with them.
Well, and then what happens when they go north? They cross the county line, and then there's like more cop cars they're sitting there waiting for him, blocking the road. So they just kind of like rolled right into his trap. So
yeah, once again, those are the kinds of reminders of the kinds of lynchings that have happened in the past, and the kinds of situations that black people have found themselves in, because somebody woke up and felt like being a real jerk that day. And I think there was a point where he basically was forcing Atticus to beg for the permission to leave, right? You got to ask me real nicely if you want me to let you even get out of here, right?
Man, that line was like, oof. When he's like, please, he's like, no. How about you say? I was like, Jesus Christ, this guy's really laying it on. He's really pushing it.
He's a bad.
Yeah, he's a bad, and apparently his racism doesn't go away even if a monster is like bringing it.
His arm gets eaten.
To the last drop. These guys, their hatred is just. It's just so much so that they can't overcome it, no matter what kind of supernatural things happening around them. They're still like.
But how satisfying was it though when they had them laying on the ground with guns to their heads, and suddenly all the cops get attacked by these monsters? I was just like, yes.
What you guys think of those monsters, by the way, with eyeballs all over them?
Yeah. They were monsters. They were legit monsters.
Well, it's the monster that
diggers.
It's the monster that he was describing from that he said was from a Lovecraft story. I've never read that story, but he described them as having like 24 eyeballs or 5 eyeballs or whatever. So I mean, obviously, you think they would be with that many eyes. You think they probably would be sensitive to light. So.
Yeah, these monsters are called the Chagoth, I think.
Chagoth.
Yeah, and Chagoth, I think there's the name of the actual monsters that are afraid of these lights. But, you know, they're blending two different genres, right? So they're telling one story, which is a very real historical story that we all know about, which is, you know, of Jim Crow South and what Black people have experienced in you know, in America during the height of its racism. But we also are telling this other story, right? This science fiction, these monsters and vampires or whatever you want to, you know, call it, whatever they are. But you're telling this other supernatural story. So you're dealing in mythology and you're also dealing in historical facts. So I like the blend of the two because, you know, you're getting something that you're already familiar with. You already know this story. You've seen the colored water fountain story before. You know about segregation, and we all have a familiarity with that. But when you add this extra element of the supernatural or the mythological and this, who knows where it's going to go. But I kind of leaning on your point, Michael, about his ancestry, and they talked about his mother and where her family's from. So they're trying to hint at something supernatural, some kind of sacred birthright that he's entitled to. So they're making a reference to him being special for some reason because of his bloodline, right? So they're also telling this kind of a mythological story of some guy who's chosen for something by some, you know, through his lineage or his ancestry.
Yeah. Also, before we move on, one very quick shout out to the lady. I forgot her name, but that Journey, right? When the lights go out, when they were, thank you, sorry. When they had right around this time, right when they survived the Demogorgons, the Stranger Things Demogorgons, and they're walking through that tunnel. Like, the lady did the best job I've ever seen of walking haggard. Like, the dudes are kind of still walking stoic, but she really sold me on, I just had the worst night of my life. Like, it showed them in like silhouettes. You know, you just see 3 silhouettes walking, and everybody at home, focus on that scene when you watch it. Like, the dudes are walking kind of like still stoic. She's walking like, dude, I got a shit right now. I have pains in places I didn't know I had places. My hair's sticking out. I don't give a shit. I mean, it was beautiful. And she's walking like I'm
hungry. Yeah.
Like, if you ever seen a girl that's like super drunk and she broke one of the heels of her shoes and she just like doesn't care anymore and she's just walking barefoot or whatever, she just nailed it. I don't know why, but it cracked me up when I saw that. I was like, good on her, man. I
just looked it up. The Chagoth. Chagoths are massive, muscular bubble blob guard dog rest creatures with multiple muscular bubble blob guard dog creatures with multiple eyes and multiple layered rows of razor sharp teeth.
Well, we have multiple eyes.
Yeah,
these guys have multiple eyes.
Didn't end well.
All right.
At least you didn't bite your head. At least you didn't bite your head off. So.
Yeah. They also had the Count of Monte Cristo in this, and I think that also was a subtle kind of hint to something. Yeah. Just all the book references, but that was
it was the book that was in his dad's apartment there was the bookmark, which was a picture of his family when he was young. So.
Yeah.
Cool.
And they kept talking about him being this little kind of bookish kid with these big bottle glass eyeglasses,
right?
And always having his face stuck in a book.
I think the character named Tree said, "Tick, is that you doing? I didn't recognize you with your bottle, without your bottle glasses or something like that." Also think it's cool that his name is Atticus. Reminds you of Atticus Finch of To Kill a Mockingbird. Right. So that's cool. I don't know whether that was deliberate, but I always assume so when there are references like that.
Atticus Freeman.
Right. Freeman is also a great last
name.
He's
a free man. He's a free man.
There it is. Yeah. So lots more to talk about there, but we're almost out of time. Cirroc, let's talk about you for a minute, Mr. Cirroc Lofton. First of all, thanks very much for joining us and lending your thoughts our way. How are you?
I'm good. I'm doing well. Thank you. Yeah.
Everybody at home, I don't need to tell you, you're probably watching this because it is Cirroc Lofton, but you know him as Jake Sisko on Deep Space Nine. He's also my co-host and buddy and partner on The Seventh Rule. We have a lot of fun together. He was also a star in the 90s show Hoop Life, right?
Hoop Life was in 2000, but yeah.
That's practically the 90s.
When I
watched the episode, the clothes you guys were wearing still look like late 90s to me.
Oh, yeah, 90s clothes, that's for
sure. So I do want to ask you, like, people do run into this all the time as actors. There's kind of like that Star Trek curse where you played 7 years in Star Trek and then you go audition for something and people go, "Oh, no, I really like you. You did a great job, but you're too recognizable as that character. You wouldn't work as this." Did you ever get into that kind of situation, or were you young enough on Star Trek to where you kind of could fly under the radar?
Yeah, I wasn't aware of this Star Trek curse, when we were doing it. And I didn't think much about it, but I do think it did play some effect in my career afterwards. I mean, there are, for example, Star Trek is not really looked at as a black show, and therefore our audience is not necessarily considered as a black demographic. And when you're doing a show and you're looking for, and you're doing a black show and you want that demographic, you're less likely to pick somebody who has a fan base like mine because you're thinking, I'm not going to attract too many black viewers. And so that, I think, is the one way in which it affected my career after Star Trek. And I don't know if that's typical for other black Star Trek actors like LeVar or Michael Dorn, but I know that that's been kind of the experience for me. But I don't let that, I don't play into it too much. So I just go and continue to do what I can do. If it exists, it exists. It's nothing that I can prove in court. Otherwise, he's filing suit.
Yeah. That's a good point. When you started acting outside of Star Trek, whether it was at the same time, the 7 years during Star Trek or afterwards, did you ever find yourself like comparing it like, oh, well, when I'm on Star Trek, the food's way better, or you guys, your hours are crazy over here? I mean, did you ever feel like you were spoiled by Paramount and Star Trek, or maybe you went on other sets and you thought they were better, but did you ever have that kind of feelings or thoughts?
Yeah, I've had that feeling many times. Different sets are run differently. Sometimes the crew is scared of the cast and they, whisper and tiptoe around certain people. And, but I think the thing I was spoiled by the most is the love, the affection that I got from Avery Brooks. That was something that I wasn't able to duplicate anywhere else or find an even a close proximity to. So working with other actors, you kind of expect them to be that, as me being the younger person and working with other older actors and black actors, and you would expect them to kind of take them under your wing or kind of give you the guidance that somebody like Avery gave me. But I realized that that was rare. As I started to work with other people, I started to realize that it's actually a closed, competitive thing as opposed to an open, generous thing, right? It's more like if you're looking for an agent or you're looking for representation in the Black community, it's more closed. So people were less likely to point you in the direction of somebody to work with, and less likely to help you out because they think of it as competition. And so Avery was the opposite. He was generous with his everything, and specifically his knowledge, and gave me so much wisdom and information, and opened doors for whenever he could open the doors for me, point me in the right direction whenever he could. And I didn't find that with other stars or other actors. That's a rarity, and that's what separates him in my book from so many other people that I've admired in the past, but once I got to know them, they were kind of a letdown because they were self-centered in their approach to life.
Yeah, they were self-sealing.
Yeah,
but no, but that's something I hadn't thought about. That I don't know if you ever really mentioned that. I mean, you've definitely told many stories, and I've heard many stories from other people about how protective and fatherly Avery was to you, but I never realized that, like, if you spend 7 years with that and then you go out into the big wide world, like, Avery kind of spoiled you by being so amazing, so gracious, so protective, so fatherly. You go to this other thing and you're like, oh, you're playing my dad, you're playing my brother. Hey, you want to go to a ball game? They're like, what? No, man, we're just running lines, dude.
We're just acting here.
Yeah, we're just acting. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I mean, and that's the sad truth. And the other aspect of it is that Avery was so aware of the culture and so aware of the impact of what the work was to the culture. So he knew how important it was for him to get it right and to do it the way he wanted it done, because he knew the long lasting effects it would have on Black people in the future. And I don't think that kind of approach is done by other actors. Other actors are really somewhat oblivious to the impact of their work sometimes, or to the education of the background of what they're doing, right? So I could get a job and play Huey Newton as a Black Panther in a movie, but if I don't know what Black Panthers is about, if I don't know what they represent and stood for, then I'm not really fully able to bring it justice. If I'm just reading lines and I'm just trying to mimic somebody's voice or mannerisms, and I'm not seeing the historical context of what the significance of it is, or how it aligns with other things, then I'm kind of doing it a disservice. And I think that Avery was really good at knowing where historically things place, and the impact that the work has.
Speaking of impact, I did want to ask this last question about that. I know that you have been inundated for the last 25 years with people talking about how important what you and Avery did on Deep Space Nine was. The representation of a strong family unit, of a good father that was there for his son, of the affection that was there, the guidance, the strength, the love. I mean, it was just like this beautiful, amazing, wonderful thing to see. And even more so from, Black people who didn't get to see that very often. Less and less the farther back in time you go, and how much it mattered to them. And I know you hear that all the time. And, we hear that all the time, the stories of people saying, dude, you have no idea what you guys meant to me growing up. And I wanted to ask you, did you have any idea when you were acting how important that was? We know Avery must have, and it showed in his performance and how he treated you and how he treated the show, like how important he made sure that the show was. Did you have any idea about that? And if so, did Avery kind of guide you through it, or say, don't worry, just focus on me, or whatever it was that helped you through that?
Yeah, I really didn't have an idea what I will say though is that much like this Atticus character in Lovecraft, I was a studious kind of nerdy person, right? So I grew up being a good student and sometimes even being ridiculed for being a good student. So my emphasis and focus was just on being uh, good, being smart, doing well in school. Um, Avery obviously had this whole worldly knowledge and this, much more information than I had at the time. So yeah, he did do a lot of the guidance as far as that, as far as me being aware of it. But I just want to put a few things in perspective. We were doing this in 91, 92. I think in 92 we started.
First episode, yeah.
Yeah, and this is before Tupac was famous, before Biggie Smalls made an album, before Jay-Z was famous, before Kobe played basketball. This is
before G Thing?
Before Ain't Nothing But a G Thing came out. This is like a long time ago. And so and like I mentioned earlier, we weren't in the lexicon of the black, shows.
Mm-hmm.
We were in a lexicon of science fiction shows, which kind of was superseded just the small demographic of just black only. And so I think we may have gotten overlooked as far as the kind of message we were trying to lay out, right? We were trying to lay out this positive message for black people in the future, showing that they exist and they're still doing well and they're still being represented positively in the future. But maybe that message didn't go to the audience necessarily that we wanted to impact the most, right? Which was the black audience. So
right.
I feel like over time, as more black people have gotten into science fiction and Star Trek, the impact of the work has become more recognized, if not more significant.
It's definitely growing. Yeah. People are finally getting around to how great Deep Space Nine was, more and more and more and more. It's finally getting the recognition it deserves.
About time.
Yeah.
I mean,
it took forever, man. Well, that's really awesome. Everybody at home, this guy talks this eloquently every single week on the Seventh Rule with me, except for when I derail him and start talking about dumb basketball stuff like Greg Oden. But
or what you call a cheese sandwich in France.
Oh yeah, a croque monsieur. Cirroc was accusing me of just saying that because he thought that I just wanted to say that word. Like you go to France and they say, "What would you like to eat, monsieur?" And you go, "I would like to eat your croque monsieur." You know.
Michael, I know you've had to do this for longer than I have. So God bless you, Michael. You're doing well. You still have some hair.
He's a patient man.
Yeah, you still got me. I couldn't deal with Ryan for much more. I started out low, so I'm doing good.
I'm going for the beard next. I'm coming after your beard, man. No, but everybody definitely check out Cirroc on the Seventh Rule with me. We have a great time. We have a lot of great guests. You will love it if you like Star Trek. If you don't, you may care less. But anyway, also check him out on social media. We'll include those links in the description box below. His sister Meron does amazing artwork that you can buy, shirts, mugs, all kinds of cool things. AbyssinianKiosk.com. We will also include that. Please check it out. Really cool African designs. Really good stuff. You'll love it. Just check it out. Oh, we should have worn an Abyssinian Kiosk shirt to talk about it. But anyway.
No, but I did bring this to bring our guy with us here today.
Aaron Eisenberg.
Aaron Eisenberg.
He's still with us.
Beautiful.
And watch some Deep Space Nine. Keep those residual checks flowing.
Yeah,
right.
Keep watching, guys. We appreciate the love, and the fans have been so supportive and so amazing. I mean, you would think 25 years later that it would have not been a conversation piece anymore, but thanks to the fans and thanks for the love and the support of the franchise. It's still relevant, and I appreciate every one of you guys.
Mm-hmm. Boy, I really want to get an Abyssinian Kiosk shirt and show it, but I'm like, I feel like I'll be digging for too long, and you guys will be like, we're still recording. So
yeah, where'd Ryan go?
Yeah, just imagine that I got the shirt and I showed it. It's really cool, especially
whoa!
The Sisko Kid shirt. Check it out. You'll love it. We'll include the links. Please at least look at it so that you know what we're talking about. Anyway, so it is now time for Cirroc, get ready. This is the part where you're going to feel very uncomfortable. It is the end of the show that we like to call the Terrible Twos.
The bottom line.
Michael calls it the Terrible Twos, but everybody knows.
I only call it the bottom line.
Everybody knows it's called the bottom line.
Ryan loves to call it the Terrible Twos. And he likes to say that I like to call it that, even though he knows that I hate that. And he knows that I hate it when he tells people that I call it that. So, of course, he's just going to be, oh, Mike's getting all worked up for nothing.
God, Mike, what's a... So anyway, so it's called the Terrible Twos.
Bottom line.
And it's the final two questions, the most pertinent questions of the show. We really could just do an entire show of just these final two questions, but here they are. Number one, Michael Kenyon Rosenberg, on a scale of 1 to 10, what would you give the first episode of Lovecraft Country entitled Sundown? No way.
9.25.
Okay. Wow. 9.25. That is 9.25.
Yeah, it's
number.
A very high score. I really enjoyed this show. I thought that it was a solid show. Like I said, it pulled me in emotionally and it kept me emotionally. And by the end, I was spent emotionally, but I felt like it was worth it. It was worth the ride. Worth the 70-minute ride that it took me on to get there. And I enjoyed every minute of it. So 9.25.
I heard a puppy agreeing with you just in the background there.
Yeah, I heard that too.
The dog's like, you tell him. What about you, Cirroc? On a scale of 1 to 10, what would you give the first episode of Lovecraft Country?
Well, I'm going to give a little bit of full disclosure here, and I'm just waiting for this exact moment to reveal this information, guys.
Uh-oh. If it's whether you would watch the second episode, that's the next question.
That's the next question.
Oh. Well, I have some other information to reveal. Not that information. But the information that I have is that this is actually my second time watching this first episode.
Nice way to put it.
And the reason I watched it the first time was actually on a request. And the request was from Avery Brooks. He actually asked me if I had seen this episode and wanted to talk about this first episode with me. So I watched it the first time. And I have to say, watching it this time, the second time, I enjoyed it a lot more. I think I was a little bit not in the right state of mind. I didn't have enough of the background information to know what was going on. And I was a little bit lost in the first watching of this episode. But now watching it the second time, having a little bit of the background of Lovecraft and what they were trying to accomplish, I'm going to say that I think this was a 9 as far as a pilot episode.
Now, but I mean, I have to follow that up and say, what would you have given it the first time you saw it?
The first time I saw it, I would have given it about a 7.5.
Right.
And I maybe I wasn't in the right state of mind or receptive to it. I kind of, was like, I'm not into fantasy that much. So my not being into fantasy as much was kind of the thing that made me not fully appreciate what they were doing. And I wrote it off a little bit too early, but now I see what they're doing, and I'm kind of more acceptable of it.
Right. Well, Cirroc, you would have given it the first time upon first viewing is actually the same way I feel upon my first viewing. I'm hovering around a 7.5. I found this a really hard episode for me to pinpoint because there's so many different things that about it, so many different elements that it was hard, and then some things were delivered better than others, I thought. And I do, again, I do feel like it could have used one more pass on the script, but I'm very optimistic about where the show is going. I'm very optimistic about where the show is going. I'm sure it's going to be a good series. But I am giving it a 7.5. I feel like it's somewhere in that realm for me. Maybe if I watch a second time, it'll be a 9 for me too, just like you, Cirroc.
If I watch it again, it might be a 10.
I feel like you guys did bump me up a little bit because like that phenomenon that Cirroc is saying is once you learn more about it, you like it more. I feel like I may have been more around a 7, 7.2, 7.3, but the more you guys are telling me right now about H.P. Lovecraft and all these other things and a couple little elements that I missed, then yeah, 7.5. And it could very well be an 8 if I continue talking about it and convincing myself higher, but I better not because otherwise I'll
just keep talking. Go ahead. Yeah. What were you saying?
I was saying the second question is, for the purposes of this podcast, we all had to watch Lovecraft Country. The title now makes sense to me. Sundown. But now that the podcast is over and you're free to move about the internet, would you watch Michael Kenyon Rosenberg, the second episode? Take all the time you need to think about it.
I do need to think about this actually a little bit because actually, like when I finished watching the first episode, I was like, man, I am like emotionally drained. I mean, I keep saying that, but I'm like, I was like spent. I was like completely spent emotionally. Like I used up all my emotion watching this, and I was like, man, can I take another episode of this? But I would say, yeah, I would definitely watch the second episode.
He's a masochist.
The book nerd in me is like every time they mention like one of these books or one of these authors, I'm like, oh, hey, I've read that book or I know about that. Like when Deja Thoris comes down from the spacecraft, I was like, is that Deja Thoris? And then he's like, oh, I'm reading A Princess of Mars, and I was like, that is Deja Thoris. So I would, yeah, I'm definitely like Cirroc was saying too, like we're definitely interested to see what's going to happen with his birthright and what's going to happen with that. So I think I would watch the second episode, and I might not have a choice because my wife heard me hooting and hollering from the other room. Like when I was watching, I was like, oh
yeah.
And so she's like, man, I want to watch the show now. So if she gets into it, I'm going to have to watch the rest of it too. So,
well, yeah. Cirroc, would you watch the second episode?
Yeah, I have to say that I would watch the second episode. They left it kind of on a good little cliffhanger, and they gave me just enough for me to say, "Oh, well, what's on the other side? What's inside that castle there?
Mm-hmm.
What's going to happen? Where's his father?" And yeah, I guess the mythology aspect of it is what is intriguing. I mean, if it was just a story about racism in the South, I probably wouldn't be interested. But the fact that there's this mystery of this unknown behind, in front of us, I think is what would get me to watch the next episode.
Mm-hmm. Well, oh, and by the way, what did you tell Avery after you watched it, Mr. Avery Brooks? What did you tell him?
What did Avery say about this episode also? Yeah.
He wasn't happy about my
original assessment.
Yeah. So I made sure to make it a lot better this time, Avery. I think there were so many things that I overlooked in that first one. Like I didn't pay attention to the James Baldwin cameo voiceover. I went back and after watching it, I looked up some of James Baldwin's speeches. and those of you in the audience should really go and just Google James Baldwin and look up one of his videos. He's as good as it gets as far as talking about the Black condition in those times. So I think there were so many elements there that I missed, elements that I believe Avery inserted into his directing of Far Beyond the Stars. So when he directed that episode, he put things in there like the doors and the books and the glasses and the hats, and he picked those things like specifically and ordered them and requested them from the props department or from the set design. So I believe that those were the kinds of details that he wanted me to pick up on that I did not see the first time. And now the second go around, I did see the names of the books, and I did pay attention to the wardrobe and the things that were happening, the subtle things that were happening in the background.
So Avery, it seems like Avery loved the show because of those reasons, all those reasons, right? I mean, it seems like if he's calling you and saying you got to see this show, did he also enjoy the end, or was he like more focused on all that other stuff?
I can't speak for Avery, but I can just guess that I think what was really interesting for him was the fact that it brings him back to a time that he vividly remembers in his own experience, right? So this is not abstract to him, or this is not like a history book lesson that we would see it as. This is like firsthand. I remember being down on a bus like that, or I've traveled on a road like that, or I've encountered police officers like that. So I think that for him, it's more of the accuracy of the story is real to him. That is part, in my estimation, what he is gravitating towards, or what he's seeing is being well represented there.
Right. Wow. So, boy, this makes me feel even worse for what I'm about to say to you guys. Boy, oh boy, Avery, turn away. I'm sorry. What am I talking about? Mr. Brooks, please turn away. But don't really, because I would watch the next episode. I didn't think I was
the
going
master
to.
of misdirection.
I don't even know Misdirection. I've never met her. So I would watch it. I think that, it did have way too much setup, and they really could have chopped a little bit out. We get the elements. We don't have to give us 55 minutes of all those elements, but it did enough, and the characters were good, very good. I liked them all. There were a few scenes that were so beautifully written, apparently way more than I even noticed. Michael, you caught these better scenes than Avery Brooks did and Cirroc did, and I'm just like, wow, that's a really well-written scene. And you guys are like, there are like 12 great scenes. Man, grow up. But anyway, yeah, I would. It's done enough. And I think everybody out there should go see it too. And if nothing else, if you're teetering on watching the second episode, just remember, look, Hollywood is giving a big budget series to a Black cast here, which happens rarely. So go support it and like it and get a second season out of it. I don't know if there is supposed to be a second season, but support a show like this. It's really good. It's apparently got a ton of attention to detail, not just of the times, but of just writing literature as a whole, as Michael pointed out to us. So I hope everybody will go out and check it out on HBO Max.
Also, just to point out how clever it is to take a concept and theme that was made by a racist person and turned it into a Black story. I think that in itself is like something to just kind of take your hat off to. And
I love that.
To marvel at. Yeah. And we're 3 out of 3 saying we're going to watch the next, so that's something that even Ryan would watch the next, so that tells you something.
Yeah, I'm pretty harsh on things. I'm pretty harsh on things, but whatever. But that just means when I compliment something, it means that much more to me because I'm such a curmudgeon already. Anyway, well, thank you, Cirroc. We really appreciate you taking the time. You and your pink lamp have been amazing. Thank you for educating us and for giving us a virtual hello from Mr. Brooks that we didn't know we were going to have. That was really cool.
Yeah. He didn't know he was going to happen either.
I know.
hope he doesn't get mad about it. But I just thought that, it's interesting that we chose to do this, and it was something that popped up on his radar. So obviously it's having some impact in the world, and it's getting the mire of people that, in my mind, matter. So it's good.
It's a beautiful coincidence. I had no idea that he had suggested that you watch this when we chose this. So that's a great coincidence there. I love it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Well, and everybody at home, again, check it out, Lovecraft Country on HBO Max. Tell us who your favorite character is. If you've already seen it, tell us what you think. Scale of 1 to 10. How great is it? Who's your favorite character? Let us know. If you guys are like Ryan, you just don't fucking get it. You're an idiot. Go ahead and tell us. Whatever.
Please tell us that. Yeah.
No, don't. It'll hurt my feelings. Say it nicely. Just say, I disagree. Anyway, and let us know if you guys want us to review a show, good or bad or weird or funny or scary. It doesn't have to be great. If you want to see us slog through a terrible show, sometimes that's funny too. Very special thanks to Cirroc for joining us. Check him out on The Seventh Rule. We'll include all of his links in the description box below, including his sister's awesome store, AbyssinianKiosk.com, that we love. And any final words, guys?
No, thank you, man. Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks for being here.
Always a pleasure working with you, Ryan and Michael. It's been really awesome seeing you again, working with you once again.
Good to hear.
We're making magic one episode at a time.
Love it. Love working with you, Cirroc.
Yeah.
Seriously, it's like the best thing ever. And Michael, too, is also the other best thing ever.
Yeah.
So this has been a lot of fun.
It's okay. Really you don't have to butter me up. I know where I stand.
I know Curtis, man. That's an inside joke from Cheech and Chong.
Yeah.
So the final thing we like to do is I say this podcast was a dream come true.
This podcast was emotionally uplifting after the emotionally draining show.
This podcast is better when I'm on it.
Oh, well, sometimes we do edit things out, actually.
Yeah.
Make an exception. No, that might be the best one yet. That might be the best
no
one
arguments here, actually. So.
Yeah. Great. And everybody at home, let us know what you want us to review. Give us a like, subscribe, and do not forget what Mr. Michael Kenyon Rosenberg always likes to say.
Don't forget to watch the first of things.
I just love watching people's reactions. Cirroc's like that. That's the whole build. Anyway.